Hey everyone, Jenny here with the Essence of Tea podcast, and I have a special guest with me here today, and this is Angela McDonald with the U.S. League of Tea Growers. Hey Angela!
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Yes, I'm so excited to have discovered your organization because I have been growing tea plants for about a year at home here in Alaska in pots, of course.
Mhm.
I did have them outside last summer and they did pretty good because it was warm enough. But obviously, once it started getting cold, there was no way they're going to survive at 30 below. That
Sure.
happens in Alaska. But we have tea listeners from around the world and across the United States who are just starting to realize that they can also grow their own tea plants.
Mhm.
So thank you. And thank you so much for your organization. Would you like to share your story about how you got into tea?
Sure. So I have been working in the tea industry for about 10 years now. It was kind of a long, complicated story, but essentially, I lived in India and Tibet for about 3 years, and when I returned home, I was trying to kind of find a way to blend the family that I had in Asia with the life, of course, in the U.S. and wanted to be able to have something that gave me the flexibility to travel. And I had always loved tea. And a peculiar opportunity came up through somebody that I met to purchase a small tea company. And so thus I did that. And I have always been a very avid gardener. I love growing everything. But tea was something that I didn't realize could grow here until I found a tea farm up just about an hour north of me in Salem, Oregon, called Minto Island Farms. And I was so excited to hear about tea growing here. So I got more and more interested in it. And then I found the U.S. League of Tea Growers, which had been started by Jason McDonald and Nigel Milliken many years before, and had kind of gone through a lull where there wasn't much activity on it. But when it got going again, I was so excited about the idea of growing tea and encouraging an industry of domestically grown tea that I became really involved in the group and am currently their president, have been for about a year and a half. And so we've been working a lot on both, working with growers of all sizes, from just people who think it's, just want to have a tea plant in their house in a pot, all the way up to, people who are putting in acres and acres on a commercial farm. And we work with research institutes and researchers on resources for growers to be able to help grow the industry of domestically grown tea. But a lot of what we do, and one of my favorite parts of it, is just purely education, getting people to know that tea does grow here and that it can grow in a really wide variety of climates. So that's kind of where I have come at it from, both the side of a tea grower, a tea enthusiast, as well as, a business owner. And I think there is a lot of potential in the industry, and it's really, really exciting to see it grow. And it's exciting to get to come here and talk to people about it and share our information.
Do you know the history of tea growing in the US? Do you know any backstories? I know there's some places that have been growing tea longer than others, but if you know anything about the history, do you mind sharing with me?
Absolutely. So don't quote me on dates because I'm terrible with the exact dates, but there have been several tea growing experiments that have happened over the course of the past about 150 or so years. Earlier in the 1800s, there were some experiments to grow tea. Often tea kind of arrived, the finished tea arrived on boats from England or sometimes directly from India or China. and people, well, at that time wouldn't have been India, would have been China. People sometimes would bring tea seeds or small plants, essentially to trade. And so the first plants probably arrived that way, though we don't have a lot of information about what the, what happened with those plants and where they are now. But in the a little bit later, after the 1850s, Robert Fortune, who many people know of as taking the tea plant from China into India, he was also hired by the US government to grow tea here in the state, or to bring plants to grow here in the States. He did so. And unfortunately, the US government never paid him for his work, so he did not continue on and stay here for very long to help the industry grow. And at that point, then the Civil War broke out, and a war broke out, and so that just kind of got set aside and wasn't dealt with, and the plants kind of disappeared into the wilderness. Around the turn of the century, there was another man who decided to start growing tea, and he actually created a pretty good size farm of tea plants. He processed it. He won an award of the World's Fair, but it was more of a passion for him, and it kind of died with him. When he passed away, nobody really took up the tea. Going forward again, in the 1950s and 60s, there was some talk about growing tea in the US, and they wanted to see how viable it would be, partially because of problems with, political problems and problems with import and the potential of our supply for tea being cut off from other places in Asia. And so Lipton and some other groups did some experiments in a few places around the country to see how viable it was to grow tea in the US. And, it grew fine. They had no trouble growing the plants. What happened was that they decided that it was a little too costly to produce it here, especially when they already had such a large, steady supply of very cheap tea coming in from India and from China. And that's been kind of the general thought about the tea industry in the US ever since, is that, yeah, maybe you can grow it here, but it's going to be way too expensive because land and labor in the US are so, costs are so high that you'll never create an industry. But that's really changing. This year, 2020, also has been a fantastic example of that. Tea prices from, places such as India and China are soaring because of, problems, shortages due to COVID, also due to climate change, and then shipping costs raised dramatically. They tripled often coming from China. And there was a shipping container shortage, so shipments were delayed, and there were all sorts of problems with getting tea and herbs imported this year. And so more and more people are looking at the fact that it may actually really be important for us to be able to grow and produce our own tea. And also, specialty tea, which of course is such a terroir specific product, it's dependent on the region that it's grown in. And so if you're creating a product that is grown here in the US and has its own distinct flavor profile, there's an opportunity there to be able to produce teas that nobody else in the world can produce. And so it's very appealing, and the numbers are showing that you can sell teas, for $80 to $100 a pound easily.
We just bought tea that was $2,000 a pound.
Yeah, exactly.
It's from Hawaii, and we were on the waiting list since January. And so for the members of our university program, I put in enough just for the members so they could have a taste of it, but it's not that people are being taken advantage of,
No.
like they're adding in the cost of the labor and the land and all of those things in there. But even though it's a crazy price, you can also produce some of these amazing award-winning teas in the United States too.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and machinery is a big part of that. As we've said, labor is very expensive here. And so in order to cut down on the amount of labor hours, things like mechanical harvesters and machinery used in processing is really important. And it's very accessible now. It used to be that we would think about, machine harvested teas as being the very low quality commodity teas. But, what we're seeing now is that the technology in harvesters has really advanced, and they are having a lot of luck with small harvesters that really replicate hand plucking. And people are producing wonderful teas from them. And I think even in countries like Japan, Taiwan, they're already using these and selling them as artisan teas, which they're wonderful teas. But I think a lot of people don't realize that there was a lot of machinery in the process that went along with it, because most people think of high quality teas as being entirely handmade. So this machinery will cut down significantly on the costs, because as we all know, harvesting tea takes for a really long time.
Okay, so just for an example, my tea leaves were falling off of my tea plant here all winter. And they were stored in the bathroom because that's the most humid place I have in my house.
Sure.
And so this is a collection of pretty much everything that fell off. At first, it looked like a big space on my counter of all these tea leaves. Probably doesn't taste that good, but I saved them for this occasion. So I actually steeped this probably stale white tea, not rolled at all, processed big leaves, And that's what I'm drinking right now, is my own white tea that I grew. I'm pretty proud of it. No pesticides. It's been grown in my house. And literally, it was a pile on my bathroom counter. And by the time I put it in my cup, I'm like, what is this? Maybe 5 grams? Like, what is that? Like, that's not that much. And so imagine all day long picking these tea baskets. You see the romance of the tea hills, right? The people,
Sure.
like when I've been to India and China and they're harvesting tea leaves, I've picked tea leaves there too. I am not fast, and I bruise the tea leaves. So, but it's crazy how they can get a whole basket in a day, but it took a whole day and hours of practicing. So
yes, it's a very skilled labor. And since you're only harvesting off those brand new leaves, those are tiny. It's not the large leaves off the bottom. So it's so labor intensive. But like I say, the machinery is really advancing along. And so the Great Mississippi Tea Company is using a harvester now. They're prototyping it that really replicates the hand plucking. And their teas are award-winning teas. They've won several awards in all sorts of different competitions. And I've had them since they moved to the machine plucked teas, and they are just as good. They are really doing a good job with it, and it cut down their labor costs so significantly that they're selling their teas and selling out of their teas every year. And making a profit off of it. So they're a great model of how successful growing tea in the U.S. can be.
So, Angela, do you also grow some of your own tea plants too?
I do, yes.
And do you do it to sell, or do you do it more for a hobby?
A little bit of both. So I don't have a suitable piece of land for putting fields of tea plants in, and land here is very expensive. So what I do is I propagate a lot of tea plants. I have planted small plots of them in some different areas around the state. I share the plants with people that just kind of experiment with growing them in different places, different conditions to see what happens. And then I do sell some of them. So if I have an abundance of them, usually just to individuals, they'll contact me, say, can I, buy 5? Can I buy 20? Whatever it comes out to be.
Oh, the tea plants, not the dried tea leaves?
Oh, yeah, just the plants. Yeah. My
Okay.
plants are all still small enough that I haven't really processed any significant amount of tea. I've processed little micro batches of it, but not a significant amount, not enough to sell. So,
yeah. How many tea plants do you think you would need to make, let's see, an ounce of tea?
Well, so in order to have enough to process a batch, it's very difficult to process a handful of leaves, at least in any way other than maybe just drying them to make a white tea. If you're wanting to make a black or a green or something, it really takes enough that you can get a good ball of them after they've been gone through the kilgreen or been withered a bit, because you need to be able to roll them, and trying to roll a tiny little handful of leaves is just really difficult to do very effectively.
Oh, I'm terrible at it. I tried it in India. My tea, they didn't even want to stay, because they're so thick and leathery. I was trying to roll green tea by hand, and they just kept springing open. Or then I just played with them too much. It's like kneading your dough too much, like over kneading it. And it's disintegrates before your eyes. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm terrible at this.
I've done both of those things before. Yeah. Sometimes they just won't, if you haven't, for example, in a green tea, if you haven't steamed them enough, then they're just these whole leaves that, break and, just don't roll in a way that you want them to. And if they're too soft, if you've steamed them too much, they end up just kind of disintegrating. It's it can be so frustrating.
Yeah. And if you don't do your batch right, some of the top and the bottom ones aren't even equal.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's complicated. So really you should have, maybe a pound of fresh leaf or something like that or even half pound, you could probably do it. To be able to really make a batch. And so, to get that much leaf, partially it depends on how well you keep them trimmed, because of course you're wanting that brand new growth. And so if you let the plants get really long and spindly, you're only going to get a few sets of tips off of them. Whereas if you let them, form that really dense hedge, and trim off the top of the plucking table, then you can get a lot more tips out of one plant. But what I usually tell people, if they kind of want to just have enough plants to be able to make a little tea here and there for them and their friends, to drink, is kind of a fun thing, you probably need 20 or so plants around your house. And
that's
again, it's quite a few. Yeah, it's not a super simple thing. And again, to have enough to really do a full batch, that becomes harder than just kind of having a few leaves. Now you could do or people could do like you do, where it was, a few leaves that you just let dry and then drink it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But like I say, once you want to start rolling them and making black tea or green tea and have any kind of consistency in the flavor, it's best to have a little bit more.
Very, very fascinating. So Angela, how can people find out more about you and your company? What are resources out there? Do you have a website? Do you have a group or anything like that?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. We're on Facebook. It's League of Tea Growers. You can also, find us online. We have a website, and our membership is very affordable. We have different tiers for people who are just kind of interested and just want to learn a little more versus people who, are commercial growers. And we have international memberships as well. And like I say, it's very affordable, we try to make it easy because we want the group to be really inclusive. And then we send out periodic newsletters. We post things on Facebook and on our website. We do regular webinars about once a month on topics related to tea. This upcoming one on Sunday, I believe, is about food safety measures that you need to take if you're going to be selling tea from your farm, because that can be a very daunting subject for a lot of people. It's something that we've had a lot of members have trouble with. And then we have several coming up soon about processing different types of tea. So there's a lot of information, and we try to make it fairly easily accessible to people. And we also just encourage people to ask questions. I have members write me and say, I need help finding, sources for tea plants, or, start thinking about marketing and packaging for their products, or even just they want to buy a few seeds and grow their first plants. So where do they go? Or problems with their plants. We'll have people send us pictures and say, I don't know what's going on with this plant. All of a sudden the leaves are getting yellow, or they're getting spots on them. Like what
they all fell off except for like a couple. And yeah, like how do I save my tea plants?
Exactly. So, we kind of just want to be a resource for people who are wanting to learn more about it, to try growing tea, and, to be able to help them troubleshoot. And there's also another group online. It's called Let's Grow Tea. It's not affiliated with the U.S. League of Tea Growers, but it's a really great resource for people who just want to know a little more about growing tea. And it's a Facebook group. It's monitored also by Jason McDonald, or moderated, I guess, who, is one of the founders of the U.S. League of Tea Growers. And it's a great place to go for just information about growing tea and advice and help. And so there's plenty of ways that you can kind of find us around, and, be able to access the information that we're providing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think this will be a very eye-opening episode on the Essence of Tea podcast, and will be very helpful, especially as we're going into the warmer season of springtime and growing things outside. And it's kind of just top of mind and very perfect for this time of year. So thank you so much, Angela, for being our guest today. And everyone, make sure you head on over and just look up online the U.S. League of Tea Growers, or like she said, those private Facebook groups. I think that's actually how I discovered them, was in the private Facebook group of Let's Grow Tea. And I saw a link to a webinar that they were having, and I was like, oh man, I have to check this out. So anyways, definitely check them out online. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Essence of Tea podcast.